Well, it's been a wild week here in Ordure Creek, Wisconsin, my hometown. The Packers schedule came out this week, officially marking the end of last season. Our collective anger, depression, and disappointment over the brutal end of the last season is now marked with hope as we look ahead to the new season. We can finally forget about the championship game and look over a list of 16 teams who surely will destroy on our way to the Super Bowl this year. We also had frost this week, in May. We've also had those obnoxious March winds hitting pretty hard. Unusual seasonal weather for us around this time of year, but not completely unheard of. The community college kids like to say that this kind of weather is the result of climate change, and their parents like to tell them that there's no such thing as that hippie liberal bullshit, and even if there was, President Trump has fixed it by now. Coronavirus has definitely soaked itself into the collective ether of humanity, and Ordure Creek, which normally remains disconnected from that collective ether of humanity in a lot of ways, has also gone corona crazy. Coronavirus, never COVID-19. Only pompous hipster assholes say COVID-19, and that pretentious shit just doesn't fly around here. You call it coronavirus like an American, or if you're really cool, you don't even say coronavirus, you call it the Rona. Like many other states around the country, Wisconsin has been put under a lockdown order. Governor Evers issuing his, what he calls the safer at home order, which closes down some businesses and prevents people from living life as they normally would. You'd think that things might be relatively calm in the midst of a pandemic with a safer at home order in place. And maybe in some communities that is the case, but here in Ordure Creek, it's probably more active now than it's been since the Packers lost to the 49ers 3 months ago. There's a lot of different reasons for this explosion of activity. The governor's order really couldn't have come at a worse time if he really wanted the order to be obeyed. First thing working against the order is the sun. The return of greenery, dandelions, morning bird songs, and bees is an intoxicating drug for any soul that's spent the last few months ravaged by winter and a Packers loss. No fear of a germ was going to stop us from going out, not Ebola, not the reemergence of the Black Plague, and certainly not the Rona. People were going to leave their winter hibernation dens, throw open the windows, go for walks and bike rides, play at the parks, and have beers with friends. It was a time to start living again, not a time to start hiding away in our homes. The second thing working against the governor's order is simple: base politics. Ordure Creek is mostly Trump country, generally running about 30% conservative to 15% liberal, and the rest not giving two shits about politics one way or another. Given that Governor Evers is one of those detestable Democrats, many will just ignore the order and go on with life with a fuck you governor attitude. No bitch lib governor is going to tell them what to do, and especially since it's clearly just another liberal plot to undermine Wisconsin's economy, and the people here weren't having it. And the third thing working against the safer at home order? Well, simple genetics. Most here in Ordure Creek are just genetically predisposed to self-destructive behavior. And while the jury might be out on exactly how destructive the Rona is, just the perception of a death-dealing danger is very attractive to people here. And they're going to go out and, well, do everything they can to contract it, even if it is just subconsciously. So there it is, nature, politics, and genetics, all swirling together like water in a toilet bowl, flushing away that safer at home order. But aside from the blatant ignoring of the governor's edicts, all of life seems to have been consumed by this virus. People spend hours of their lives bickering about it on social media, and it dominates every news segment on television and every headline in every newspaper. Even our favorite girly magazine, the Dairy State Playmate, has a featured article about the virus this month, nestled between the nude photo spreads of thick Wisconsin girls in Green Bay Packer cheerleader uniforms and riding tractors. It's hard to see an article about impending mass death just before seeing May's Dairy State Playmate of the Month's coy expression as fresh cow's milk runs down her chin and her perfect bare C-cups. Hunter Jacobsen thumbs through the rest of the Dairy State Playmate and wonders why his father would bother subscribing to a nudie magazine when he can see all the naked girls that he wants online for free. He decides it must be an old person thing, like people who prefer real books to a Kindle or people who prefer talking on the phone to texting. He slips the magazine back into its proper place on the bookshelf among the others, His father's been collecting the Dairy State Playmate since 1986 and has every issue on full display right there in the living room. His father's friends displayed trophies or classic video game systems or rare Packers paraphernalia, but he has the Dairy State Playmate collection. And actually, Hunter isn't allowed to touch them, a rule that's been in effect since he was 3 years old. But the old man is out of town this week, and this issue just happened to arrive in the mail today, so he thought he'd take a gander. Hunter is one of the hardest hit victims of the lockdown order. He's been on house arrest since last April after reaching a deal with the city DA on a disorderly conduct charge. During the winter break last January at Ordure Creek Community College, he had attended a house party and had capped the night in bed with a beautiful girl. Well, he doesn't so much remember how beautiful the girl was, but her large, perfectly molded tits were beautiful, so the rest of her probably was too. And as it turned out, those magnificent tits belonged to 16-year-old Jeannie Adams, daughter of Judge Harlow Adams, who, after a bit of snooping through his precious daughter's phone, found all the sordid details of that particular evening in a lengthy text to Jeannie's best friend Samantha. The judge flew into a rage and filed charges immediately. For Jeannie's part in the whole thing, she wasn't exactly the victimized innocent little girl her father, the judge, would have you believe. The truth was that Jeannie had a schoolgirl crush on Hunter since she was 13, shortly after seeing his band play at a school-sponsored talent show. Having happened to run into the boy at this college party she wasn't supposed to be at, she took full advantage of his drunken and very obvious interest in her proportions to lure him into bed. Hunter found out the girl was 16 only when he was arrested shortly afterwards. His objections to the DA weren't without merit. Well, his objection that if it's not illegal for a 16-year-old girl to have breasts like that, it shouldn't be illegal for him to enjoy them. Yes, maybe that objection was without merit. But the fact that she was at a college party engaging in underage drinking was an objection Judge Harlow Adams certainly didn't want getting out to the general public. There's far too many degenerates in Ordure Creek that would never let him live it down. From the legal side, if this went to trial, Jeannie, still very much in love with Hunter, swore to testify that she had tricked Hunter into sleeping with her, and there was a good chance that the jury pool would be tainted with more than a few of these degenerates that Judge Adam himself had thrown fines and jail time at. So, in the end, it was agreed that Hunter would be charged with disorderly conduct, avoid the state sex offender registry, and serve 1 year on house arrest with the promise to never have contact with Jeannie Adams again, or else. Now, there is no legal definition of or else, but coming from a girl's furious father, that could mean anything from a hospital-inducing beatdown to having his head removed from his body with a double-barreled shotgun. Hunter Jacobsen had no interest in finding out what that or else entailed. He signed the papers, accepted the ankle monitor, and spent the next year dodging Jeannie's messages and texts. It was an excruciatingly long year for Hunter. While on house arrest, he couldn't drink, he couldn't smoke pot, he couldn't go out and have fun with his friends. It was a long, miserable, slow-moving slog through life. All he could dream about was finally being free from the grip of the law and getting back to living again. He also dreamt often of Jeannie Adams' tits, but he would certainly never admit that to anyone. And finally, that beautiful day arrived, freedom. In the weeks leading up to this day, he had planned out exactly what he wanted to do. The very moment that ankle monitor was cut away, he was going to rip some bong hits with the boys, head over to the local gentleman's club, the Landing Strip, for some drinks and douse himself in some stripper titty perfume. Then, after running out of dollar bills, they would head over to Creek's Edge and try to pick up one of the many single MILFs that frequented the joint, just trying to get laid like everyone else. And, as it happened, the very day he was to be cut free, the safer-at-home order went into effect. The landing strip was closed, all the bars were closed, and no one even showed up to take off his ankle monitor until 2 days later, and that only after Hunter made repeated angry phone calls. The excuse they gave him when they finally showed up to cut away his ankle monitor was that cutting away ankle monitors were deemed non-essential by the Ordure Creek PD. So Hunter comes off of house arrest just to basically go into house arrest again and returns to a world on lockdown and the entire town embroiled in bitter Rona fighting. While Ordure Creek is good about imparting the old adage that snitches get stitches and end up in ditches, there's no shortage of busybodies around here who never learned social proper etiquette when it came to snitching. And, of course, these people are most likely transplants from Illinois. That 15% or so in town that took the governor's order very seriously mounted a vigorous campaign of social media shaming and neighborhood watch programs that alerted the police and health department to any and every kind of violation of the governor's order. The main effort was initiated by Karen Anderson, a 43-year-old divorcee who normally has a lot of time on her hands while collecting alimony payments from her ex-husband Raul, who runs several small oil wells in South Dakota. Not having to work leaves Karen with plenty of time to engage in several efforts to turn this shitbag town into her own vision of beauty and success. She sits on nearly every community council, committee, and board and is very well known around town. And she's very much hated around town, but Karen Anderson never let that deter her from whatever town-saving efforts she needed to engage in at the moment. And right now, with a pandemic upon them, she took it upon herself to save the town from certain mass death by organizing a neighborhood watch program called the COVID Combat Community Patrol, or CCCP for short. With the help of her sisters-in-arms, Karen Krajewski and Karen Miller, also middle-aged women who shared the Alpha Karen's vision of a better town, and who referred to themselves as the Triple K. Yes, Karen Anderson was not always very self-aware when it came to abbreviations, despite the occasional objection from the other two Karens. But the three Karens took to patrolling their own neighborhood, looking for those who would dare violate the governor's orders. What started as the three Karens grew into an army of 20 or so supporters by the end of the first week of the order, and Karen Anderson recruited 74-year-old Mrs. Markham's sewing circle to knit uniform face masks for the CCCP. They would all be red to symbolize the blood that would be spilled by COVID deaths were it not for their gallant efforts. And soon every neighborhood in Ordure Creek was being patrolled by these red-masked CCCP agents. The Triple K, the Karens, this unholy trinity, always referred to the coronavirus as COVID-19. Children were shooed away from parks, adults were accosted for being too close to one another, business owners were harassed if they dared to remain open, and social media groups buzzed with information on violators. 12-year-olds Joey Reynolds, Carlos Ortiz, and Timmy Crake were chased out of the skate park by the CCCP. Ronnie Belante was busted by the CCP behind the Ordure Creek Senior Care Facility as he tried smuggling hash brownies to his 93-year-old grandmother through her bedroom window. Andrea Swenson was harassed for not wearing a mask while walking her dog, and only after a day of this nonsense, anti-CCCP sentiment was at its height. And at the time of this narrative, countermeasures are already being organized within a secret Facebook group that I only know about because I've been added as chronicler of city events. Already, the ideas being thrown around include tar and feathering anyone caught wearing a red mask and throwing rotten fruit at any of them walking or biking past your house as they make their rounds, but so far no organized form of countermeasures can be agreed upon. So the constant social media bickering between the two factions is quickly evolving into a low-key civil war in the streets of Ordure Creek. It already looks like this pandemic is going to cause a lot of grief here, but not for the reasons anyone anticipated. It's already been a month of lockdown, and people around here are just starting to lose their fucking minds. And this madness is the world that Hunter Jacobsen has returned to. He'd always been a positive, upbeat, ambitious by Ordure Creek standards, but at this point into the lockdown, he had fallen into a state of depression that he'd never experienced before. All he did was sit at home smoking weed, playing PS4, while entertaining the occasional visit by a close friend or two. While some people enjoyed the current state of sitting at home, drinking, smoking, and playing video games, socialites like Hunter hated every minute of it. He needed to do something else. He needed to get drunk. He needed to get laid. He had been miserable for over a year, following every little rule and edict given to him by the courts, resisting every drug and alcohol temptation through sheer force of will just to be able to get to this point in his life again where he can go out, only to find that it had all been for nothing. Well, if he couldn't go somewhere with people, he was going to bring the people to him by throwing a special, masks-required lockdown party. It would be fun, a masked ball of sorts. Everyone could come and hang out and wear their masks and just do something fun for a change. The party wouldn't start till 9 just to make sure that it was dark out before people started filing in and hopefully provide cover from the CCCP's very watchful eyes. Hunter sent word of his masked Rona-compliant party into the texting sphere where it rippled throughout town. He then went to work covering the inside of his windows with cardboard so that while there was a party going on inside, it would look like nobody was home at all from the outside. Genius, he thought. Thankfully, here in Wisconsin, liquor stores are considered essential, so they're always open. So he loaded up on a few items and trusted his friends to bring some more. By 11 o'clock, Hunter's masked party was in full swing, and the 30-plus guests in attendance had completely forgotten about the lockdown as they enjoyed the Halloween-esque atmosphere and costumes and drinking games and music and the alcohol-fueled fellowship with one another. The variety of masks people wore to the party alone made it a hit. There was an authentic World War I gas mask. Someone wore one of those elongated, beak-like, creepy plague doctor masks. People had stormtrooper masks and Darth Vader masks, all kinds of masks. The only one who actually wore one of the usual boring surgical masks was some cute green-haired girl in a full nurse's outfit that Hunter had been chatting and flirting with all night. Well, at least he guessed she was cute. She had her face covered with the surgical mask, but really, what girl isn't cute in a nurse's outfit? Without realizing it, Hunter was enjoying himself a little too much. This was, after all, his first night out since his arrest last year, so his social drinking equilibrium was completely off, and he was far more drunk than he wanted to be by midnight. And it wasn't much later than that Hunter had successfully flirted the green-haired nurse right up into his dark bedroom. Slamming the bedroom door shut to the increasingly louder party behind them, Hunter ripped the girl's mask from her face in the semi-darkness, and the two of them melted into each other's mouths on their way to the bed. The nurse pushed Hunter to the bed and ripped off everything below his waist and aggressively locked hips with him, while Hunter ripped away the nurse's top, freeing two of the largest, most perfect breasts he had ever seen. In fact, every bit as good as the breasts that landed him into all that trouble to begin with. This, he thought through his drunken fog, this is all I've really wanted to do. This party was the single greatest idea that I have ever had. Well, for whatever reason, it's right about this time that somebody in Ordure Creek is celebrating whatever tiny victory the universe has granted them, that something within the cosmic consciousness seems to take notice of that person and make a correction. I don't know why the universe is constructed in such a way. I suppose we'll have to leave that to Pastor Kelvin over at the Brimstone Baptist Church or Reverend Vonnegut over at the secular Church of God the Utterly Indifferent, or other philosophers and theologians much smarter than we are to answer why this should be the case. But no sooner had this positive thought shot across the blurred and sloppy topography of Hunter's intoxicated brain that the lights of his bedroom blasted to life, blinding both he and the nurse as they instinctively snapped from fully absorbing, carefree, drunken sex to grasping for blankets to hide their naked bodies behind. Hunter could barely make out two silhouetted shapes in his doorway as his eyes struggled to adjust to the searing light. As his vision focused more through his squinting, he began to make out the details of a couple of cops, heads half turned away from the compromised couple. "Well, what the hell do you guys want?" a breathless Hunter demanded. "Yeah, sorry, Hunter," Officer Andrew Slater replied sheepishly. "We got a noise complaint from one of Karen Anderson's people. You know how they are." "Yeah, fine. Just tell the guys downstairs to keep it down then." Hunter just wanted to get back to what he was doing. The second officer, Hope Reed, said, "Well, we're going to need to see ID." Hunter is annoyed. "Fine, whatever." His love machine was beginning to lose some horsepower, and he just wanted them out. "You already know I'm 21, and so is everyone else here, so just do what you got to do." I wasn't talking about you or everyone else," Hope said. "Just her." Eyes now fully adjusted to the light, Hunter looked over at his green-haired nurse, and there sitting next to him, Jeannie fucking Adams. A very, very awkward silence hung between the four of them. Jeannie looked over at a stunned Hunter. "Why have you been ignoring my messages?" she asked. And that's the latest from Ordure Creek, Wisconsin this week, where the beer is thick, The cheese is fresh, and the Packers are above average. If you're enjoying this podcast, consider showing your support by passing it along to people that you think might also enjoy it. And if you're really a big fan of the podcast, you can head over to patreon.com/dairystate. Throw some money for beer and pot at me. And I just want to say, thanks for listening.